Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MCC Today Show. My name is Sharon Adasme. I am the editor of the Calumet. Today, my guest is Ray Gorman. He's the son of the original editor of the Calumet, and we're going to be talking today about how the Calumet bridges connections. So, why don't I go ahead and introduce this character? This is Ray's father, Ray Gorman. And Ray, tell us a little about your father, kind of how he came out to Iowa to MCC to study.
Well, he was born in Brooklyn, went to a nice, good Catholic high school that required a bit of tuition money that they didn't always have. He did well in his school, and he applied to several colleges, got accepted several places, but really couldn't afford to go anywhere. Luckily, his sister and her husband lived out here in Grandview, and he moved out to stay with them because he was able to afford to come to Muscatine Community College. And like the big city kid he was, I think he took over.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So before Ray got here, there was a paper at the school. It was kind of off and on. It was called the Auroran, then it was called the Tattler. But when Ray started, they changed everything. And it became the Calumet, and it was something to be more of a community paper, more of a, everybody was invited to participate and put input in. And what Ray was kind enough to do when he was looking through some of his father's things last year, he found a box of what was marked school papers.
School papers.
And got our information, was contacting our advisor, and so we get a package in the mail, and it says, do not bend, do not bend, do not bend. It's covered in tape. And so we very carefully, we placed it in front of the table. We had a bunch of our staff members, and what was inside was some old newspaper clippings, some pictures, different documents, and then, of course, what we were really excited about were original Calumet issues. So they look a little different than what they do now. Now they're a little on newspaper. These are on normal paper, you said, and they are typed on a typewriter, but it starts out, October 26, 1951, and they smell like old book. It's beautiful. Ray's father was the editor, and it was just really cool to be able to see how all of that just started. So, Ray, when you were looking through your father's school papers, how did you find the Calumet? How did you make that connection to bring that to us?
Like I said, I'd gone through the box, marked school papers, and I assumed it was report cards, letters home, various things like that. They were under some other essays that he had written. On the bottom of the box were these approximately 12 copies of Calumets. He had always talked about the Calumet and what a struggle it was to get it started, and sleeping in the school and doing all this other stuff. Now, I knew it had to be important to somebody, but unfortunately, I couldn't do anything with it. It wouldn't be safe with me, so I reached out to Mr. Adolphi, Mark, to find out if you were interested in obtaining these specimens of the past. And he was relatively excited about getting the possibility of getting these 12 copies. So, and among the papers was some of the articles from the Journal, I believe, about the announcement of the newspaper starting up again, and then the announcement of my father becoming the first editor of the JC paper. And that's, you have there, I think it's printed in the issue that comes out tomorrow?
Yes. Yep. So we have a Calumet issue that comes out March 22nd. And so, there are newspaper clippings from the Muscatine Journal that talk about just what Ray said, how back in 1951 when it was still Muscatine Junior College, how the Calumet is going from the name, the Tattler, to the name Calumet, and what it means, why it was chosen, how that process came about. And then there was a different clipping that actually in the Muscatine Journal said that Ray Gorman would be the editor of the junior college newspaper, which we thought was really interesting. So yeah, we have newspaper clippings. We have in the story that we wrote in the Calumet, in the current Calumet, about the archive Calumets, we talk about, you know, the name change, why that was important, why or how a newspaper back then was important to them, how it is important to us, some of the differences, but how just everybody wants the community to be involved. We want people to give their input. We want their opinions. We want their ratings. We want their reviews. We want people to be connected by it. And that was something that struck me personally as we were going over the Calumets, was that they just wanted this whole idea of community and connectiveness. And that's what we want from our Calumet today. So that was just really cool. I mean, it was just this whole generation bridge, which was really cool.
And as far as I'm concerned, they were a little ahead of the time because of, as we found, the co-ed editor, which was a term that Sharon was unfamiliar with until I had to explain that co-ed in the 50s meant that you were a girl going to college. You were called a co-ed, and that's why they had the co-ed editor. Now they probably wouldn't have such a thing. It would be associate editor or something like that. But then, you know, they were inclusive of the feminine side.
Which was, yeah, that was awesome. So, yep, we have almost 12 issues of the original Calumet. They have been archived in the Muscatine Community College Library. There are various pictures, like I said, and then, so can you go ahead and just, this picture was
Okay,
of
this would have been my dad approximately 1950, just in his last year of high school, just before he came out here. And that's kind of what he looked like. Good-looking kid.
Yep, he's pretty good looking.
And this was a picture taken approximately 3 or 4 years ago that he had done professionally through his church. And I just thought that would be a nice picture to have to send out, to bring out here, because it looks professional and a picture you would have of an editor.
Yeah, and it is a very nice picture. So yes, our plan actually is to put these up on the wall in our newsroom in Moper Hall, and then kind of have a plaque of his name, Calumet, you know, original editor,
I'm very touched about that. That's a little bit news. I wasn't sure. I didn't know about a plaque.
No, I want to make it special because, I mean, this Calumet experience, I honestly, I took it because I'm a journalism major. I wanted to write, but I didn't know if I could go out and interview people. I didn't know if I could write a story or keep to a deadline, produce a paper. And
that shouldn't make any difference. If you want to write, just write.
That's true.
That's what my father did. It didn't matter anybody was going to read it. He wasn't going to send it out to a lot of places. He wrote, and that's what he liked to do. He wrote, and he was a big fan of wordplay.
Yes, yeah.
On that, but it didn't matter to him that nobody was going to read these things.
That's very true.
You know, the fact that some people did, which is fine, but he just write what you know and write what you like, and that's what he did.
And he was always very positive, very light.
Yeah, he did write more about the lighter side of life, and there were I do remember a couple of columns that he did write. He also wrote for a local town newspaper when I was growing up, and he did that for about 11 years weekly, like you under the pressure, writing 1,200 words, not 1,200 words, maybe 500 or 600 words every week in his scribbly scrawls. But mostly it was the lighter side of growing up in suburbia in New York, and there were 2 or 3 possibly that were a little more serious. Probably had to do with the school issues in local to the neighborhood, or maybe a national tragedy or something. I don't remember specifics, but he tended to stick to the lighter side because that's the kind of guy he was.
Well, that's awesome. We need a little bit more of that.
And after he retired and moved down to Florida, he began to write plays, comedy sketches.
Oh, okay.
Like I said, lighter side of being retired in Florida.
Yeah.
And I didn't bring it with me, but he also wrote his own take on Who's on First and the Abbott and Costello
Who's
thing.
on first? Who's on second?
Very
That's
similar
awesome.
to that, involving Kofi Annan and something other thing. It was very funny. I wish I brought it with me.
And you've mentioned before that your dad loved British comedies.
Yes, he was a big fan of the British comedies. He especially loved the Are You Being Served, obviously. Mm-hmm. But what really got him into the British comedies was when he had his second heart attack and had a triple bypass done in 1978. They sent him to Houston to be done by Dr. DeBakey, who was basically the doctor for bypasses at the time.
Yeah.
And at that time, he had this TV that you had to pay your $2 a day for. And on the public television station, there was a show called Dad's Army.
Okay.
Now, many people who remember Dad's Army will say it was probably the funniest show on British television ever. And unfortunately, 3 or 4 days after you've had your chest open from your Adam's apple to your belly button, laughing quite that hard isn't the best prescription for that kind of treatment. So they started to give him a pillow to hug onto when he was laughing.
Oh my
and then the
gosh.
nurses made him turn it off.
Oh
He
no.
was unable to watch because it was
Oh.
just too much pressure on his.
Oh.
He was a laugher. If something struck him as funny, he was going to laugh at it, and that got him started on that. So as soon as he got home, he was able to sit, but he had his laugh pillow.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
And he could watch all the public television. He'd put on the Channel 13 in New York and watch all the British comedies that came out weekly, and that's just got him started.
Well, that's
And
fantastic.
He was also the big fan of the wordplay. He was also a whatever they call it, cruciverbalist, whatever it is, the crossword puzzle
Oh, okay.
guy. Cruciverbalist, I think is the word.
Gotcha.
And said Sunday Times puzzle in ink every week, and he'd have it done.
Wow.
Before Monday night, it was usually done because he was also working on 2 or 3 others
That's
from
incredible.
the local papers.
Yeah.
And he would fill it out, and he would write a note and then send it out to my sister, saying that he did it this week, and she would get it before the next week.
Wow.
And he very rarely even checked to see it because he knew it was right.
Awesome. Lighthearted, positive, laughing, confident kind of person.
That's what happens when you read and when you write.
That's very
If you want to
true.
write, you have to read.
I have heard that before. You got to read. Wow. It was super cool interviewing Ray. We called before he came out here and talked about just the difference between, growing up in suburbia, living in Iowa, how Iowa is. Ray said that his first impression was Iowa was very dark and very flat. And I kind of was like, what? But when he explained it, your dad took you out and kind of drove along a country road and turned the car off and got out of the car. When you're in the
After
country.
turning the lights off.
Yep. There aren't street lights with the cars off and there's no light. I mean, all the stars come out. And I think for anybody, but especially coming from suburbia, that would leave a pretty
Even
big
for my
impact.
father, being that urban child who may have seen 6 or 8 stars a night at tops on a clear winter's night in Brooklyn, coming out here was probably culture shock. And I think he wanted to share that with me to say, here, click.
Yeah.
And you could see, which is, from the starlight you could still see, and that's even with a new moon or very little moon, you could still see what you were doing. I wouldn't drive at 60 miles an hour.
No. Oh, no.
But yeah, that was an amazing experience, and that's I think one of the things I'm going to try to do a little bit later on is get out in the dark and see if I can relive that moment.
That's awesome. Well, good luck with that. I know Iowa country roads have some pretty magical happenings sometimes, so. But this, I personally cannot just express how grateful our Calumet staff is that you made contact, that you sent us these archives, that you were able to share your dad's story, and that, somebody like your father could continue to influence generations of students and writers and readers. And, I'm going to be a journalist because I had the opportunity to be on the Calumet. And I want to be somebody who is positive and lighthearted and can counteract all of the bad that media has and all of the depressing news. There is good out there. I know there is. And your dad was one of the examples of there's always something you can write about that's fun. There's always something you can find that's good.
There's always something you can write about, good or bad. And like I said, obviously these copies meant a lot to him to keep them as protected as, even in the shape that they're in. They're a lot better shape if they hadn't been kept, in climate-controlled conditions, not necessarily the best climate-controlled conditions. But they weren't in an attic, they weren't in a damp crawl space, but it meant a lot to him, obviously, that he held on to them for so long, that I figured it had to mean something to somebody else. And that's when I decided to contact Mark Rodolfi there, your coordinator, I guess that's what you call him?
Yeah, coordinator, advisor.
Advisor? Contact him and see if you guys would be interested. And obviously he was very interested.
Yeah, very interested.
I'm a little overwhelmed at the response and the reception that I got today, so I thank you very much for that.
Well, that was our pleasure. Absolutely our pleasure. Well, this whole experience, this whole Calumet generation bridge has just been a reminder to everybody that we are all the same. It doesn't matter where we are from, where we grew up, what we study, what we do. We're all in this together. We're all just trying to do our best. So thank you, Ray, for coming out, bringing your dad back to MCC.
And thank you for the reception.
So we do have a paper coming out tomorrow, March, it's only March 22nd. You can find the Calumet online. You can pick it up in shelves on the MCC campus. Otherwise, we'll post it or you'll hear it, but we'll see you around. Thanks for watching, everybody.